You're listening to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance, Protecting Texas Churches. The show that gives pastors and church leaders the clarity they need to protect their people, property, and ministry.
Welcome back to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance, Protecting Texas Churches. I'm your host, Ron Wadley with Insurance for Texans. We help church leaders protect their people and property with wisdom and clarity. Today's episode is for every finance committee member who has ever looked at an insurance quote and thought, I've never even heard of this company. Can I trust them? Phil heads up the finance committee for a growing church in Austin. 2 years ago, Phil was in a state of total panic. His church had been with the same big-name carrier for 20 years when they suddenly got a non-renewal notice. Back then, in 2024, the Texas market was a storm. Insurance companies were fleeing the state. Phil scrambled, eventually landing a policy with us at Insurance for Texans. The insurance policy allowed the church to keep the doors open. But let's be honest, it was a survival purchase. Well, it's now 2026. The winds have shifted. The market is finally softening and capacity is returning to Texas. Phil called me the other day because he wanted to know if there were better options for the church's renewal this year. When we talked, Phil was adamant about one thing. He didn't want to go back to one of the big three insurance companies who were household names a few years ago. They had left him high and dry when things got tough, but he was also nervous about using companies he didn't recognize. Here is the reality for Texas churches in 2026. The best partners for your ministry are likely companies you've never heard of. I call them the quiet giants. Names like Promont, USLI, and Philadelphia insurance companies. These aren't fly-by-night operations. They are A-rated, solvent, and stable companies. The reason you haven't heard of them is simple. They don't buy Super Bowl ads or take out full-page spreads in church magazines. They save that money to pay claims, and they work exclusively through independent agents who specialize in commercial property insurance. I also told Phil to be careful. As the market softens, we're seeing bottom dollar quotes popping up again. It is incredibly tempting to jump at a premium that's 40% lower than the rest, but a good company isn't the cheapest one. It's the one with the reserves to pay a $200,000 hail claim without blinking. When a premium is that low, it's usually because they've stripped away your protection. They might be forcing your roof onto a depreciation schedule or removing ordinance or law coverage, the stuff that pays for code upgrades when you rebuild. In the course of our conversation, Phil also asked me about surplus lines insurance companies. He was concerned that surplus meant substandard, but that's not the case. In reality, for many Texas churches, an A-rated surplus lines carrier like Lloyd's of London or Scottsdale is the most secure option on the table. They have the flexibility to price risk for the actual Texas weather, which allows them to stay in the market when the big names run for the hills. Finally, I warned Phil about the rise of member-owned programs. They look attractive, but many have a managed repair clause buried in the fine print. That means if your roof is destroyed, you can't call the local contractor you've trusted for years. You have to use their vendor on their timeline, using their materials. Don't trade your autonomy for a slightly lower monthly bill. The church insurance landscape has changed, and the old rules don't apply anymore. You need a guide who can filter out the policies that strip your coverage with roof sublimits or hidden clauses. At Insurance for Texans, we have helped hundreds of churches to find good coverage, even during the rough years. Find out the difference that experience can bring. Connect with our church insurance team at insurancefortexans.com. And if you want to know more about church insurance in general, get a free copy of our book, The Promise of Certainty, at thepromiseofcertainty.com. I'm Ron Wadley, and this has been Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance, Protecting Texas Churches. Until next time, remember, don't leave your church's insurance to chance. Call the experts at Insurance for Texans.
Thanks for listening to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance. Until next time, remember, Insurance isn't just about policies, it's about safeguarding the mission God has called you to lead.